right, chat. We got to move. I'm falling behind. I do want to quickly just glance over chapter 16, what we read yesterday. We saw the Lord sitting upon his throne, the seraphim. This is, okay, and the seraphim comes and places the coal on Isaiah's mouth. He's forgiven of his sins, and from what we understood, in conjunction, was called to preach, called to be a prophet. And he says, how long is he going to do this? Until the cities be wasted without inhabitant, and the houses without man, and the land be utterly desolate. But we do read at the end of that interesting, now that I'm kind of revisiting the chapter, it's kind of interesting to me that Isaiah says, he mentions that the cities will be left desolate, and then seemingly randomly changes the subject to the Lord have removed men far away, and then talks about a tenth that returns. Talks about a remnant of the house of Israel returning. And I don't think it's random. It's referencing the fact that the lands are made desolate so that the remnant can return and inherit the land, which is a common theme, common prophecy. We've read about that a lot with just Nephi and Jacob so far. Moving on to chapter 17. Ephraim and Syria wage war against Judah. Christ will be born of a virgin. Christ will be born of a virgin. That's a big deal in Isaiah. Surely something is taken out of the book of Isaiah that we'll find in here. That's just my prediction. And if I understand Ephraim and Syria waging war against Judah, Ephraim and Syria represents the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes, and Judah is the southern kingdom, the 2 tribes. Verse 1, and it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah. Hold on. Ahaz is the son of Jotham. Okay, so Ahaz is the grandson of Uzziah, king of Judah. That Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. So he starts talking about war. This war that happened in 2 Kings, I believe, is about the timeline. And I've kind of forgot what I have learned from this, but I always walk away from these chapters thinking that I walk away from these chapters feeling like they indicate what we can expect to see as far as like relations between nations go and how the wars are going to happen and the alliances and all that stuff. But I could be wrong. Am I taking a break for the whole summer or did I quit? I quit. I honestly don't ever want to play that game again. I'll kind of have to for the next little while to do my work, but I'm not going to be playing on my account ever. Just the dev build. Okay. So let's kind of see what's going on here. Sad. I want your account. All right. How much are you going to pay me? Psych, it's not for sale, my friend. I'm sorry. Okay, what are we looking at here? King of Syria and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. Okay. What Isaiah chapter is this? Chapter 7. I'm starting in Isaiah chapter 7. So it's just going to sit there doing nothing forever? Probably. I'm starting in Isaiah chapter 7. Can you give me sort of a geographical breakdown of these kings / nations and their alliances, as well as why they are at war. Let's see what ChatGPT can cook me up here. It's okay, Gritty. One day you'll realize that it doesn't matter at all. Hopefully, anyway. Okay, Isaiah 7 can be confusing because several kingdoms are involved at once. Here's the political map behind the chapter. So there's Judah, which is the southern kingdom. So Jerusalem's right up there at the top. See, it's confusing to me because Israel is now, like, the nation of Israel actually is encompassed. It encompasses Jerusalem. Jerusalem's like the capital of it. King Ahaz descendant. So Ahaz is the king and descendants of the house of David. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, okay. Ahaz, grandson of whoever. Descendants of the house of David. This is Isaiah's kingdom and the primary audience of the chapter. Oh, actually, that's pretty helpful. So Judah, Isaiah lives in the southern kingdom. I actually don't know if I knew that. and the primary audience is the southern kingdom. Israel, the northern kingdom, often called Ephraim in Isaiah. The capital is Samaria. King is Pekah. Remember that after Solomon's reign, Israel split into a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. Right. So in Isaiah 7, Israel and Judah are separate nations. And then there's 3 here. Syria or Aram. Capital is Damascus. King is Rezin. So where's Syria at? Syria. I'm not finding it here. Where the John Wall is Syria? Ooh. Here we go. That's Aram. Okay, that just shows the 2 kingdoms. I'm still not finding Syria. Why? Kingdom of Ammon, Kingdom of Aram or Damascus. So it's way up here. That's what we're talking about, right? Isn't that what I just read? Yeah, capital is Damascus, Syria, or Aram. So they're way up here. And from what it sounds like, these 2 kingdoms are trying to team up in order to defeat Judah? Is what I think we read. We'll come back to that. And then there's Assyria. The capital is Nineveh. The king during this period is Tiglath-Pileser III. What a name. Assyria was the great superpower of the region. Okay, so Assyria is the top dog. But they're way up. They're way up. So this is all happening over here, I believe. But this is Assyria. So they're the top dog, but they're kind of a deal away from these guys, if I am understanding this correctly. Yeah, like here's Samaria and Jerusalem and... Oh, but this whole thing is the Assyrian Empire. So it actually includes a lot of the northern kingdom, but it doesn't include Judah. It would seem. Okay, we're moving. The basic situation is alliance number 1. Israel or Pekah, the king of Israel, Syria or Aram, these 2 kingdoms form an alliance. Right. Standing alone is Judah. Judah refuses to join the alliance. The threat is Assyria. Everyone is worried about Assyria's growing power. Okay. That's crucial. Why are they at war? Around 735 BC, Assyria was expanding aggressively. Israel and Aram wanted a united front against Assyria. They essentially told Judah, join our coalition against Assyria. And then if I remember correctly, they reject it, and then they go to war with Judah instead. Instead, they attack Judah. King Ahaz refused. As a result, Israel and Aram decided to force the issue. Yeah. They were jumping ahead to verse 6. Let us go up against Judah, they say, and set a king in the midst of it. They wanted to invite Judah, or invade. Invite. They already invited Judah. Invade Judah after they reject the invitation. Remove Ahaz, install a puppet king loyal to their anti-Assyrian alliance. Okay. We're already onto something huge here. Already starting to sound very similar to what might be going on today. It's about political control, military alliances, how to respond to Assyria. Why does Isaiah enter the story? Oh, man. Oh, dude, this is juicy. This is juicy. Hold on a minute. Okay, no, let's keep reading the description and we'll try to figure it out with the scriptures afterward. So, why does Isaiah enter the story? Ahaz is terrified. Ahaz, remember, is the king of Judah. Isaiah 7, and Isaiah is in Judah. Isaiah is part of the nation that refuses to join the alliance. His heart was moved. Okay, so chapter 7, verse 2 says, his heart was moved as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. His heart was moved as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. I don't even know what that means. The alliance of Israel and Syria is threatening Jerusalem itself. Isaiah's message is, don't panic, their plan will fail. God tells Ahaz, these two kings are like smoking firebrands, burnt down sticks. They look dangerous, but they are nearly spent. The great irony. See, dude, this is so freaking crucial to what's going on today. I know it. The great irony. Ahaz has two options. Option one, trust God. Isaiah urges him to do this. Or, okay, so Ahaz is getting all nervous now because Ephraim and Syria are teaming up against him. So Isaiah comes to him and he's like, okay, listen, you can either trust God, or option two is you can seek help from Assyria. You can run to the enemy for help, the great big superpower. Historically, Ahaz chooses Assyria. He does not heed Isaiah, but he succumbs to the superpower. He essentially asks Assyria to rescue Judah from Israel and Syria. Israel does exactly that. It defeats Syria and weakens Israel. But then, okay, so the superpower takes out the threat, Syria and Israel, but then Assyria becomes an even bigger threat to Judah. To Judah! Then, so you would think that Judah would be like, oh, sigh of relief, Assyria saved us, but actually the very nation that they ran to for safety has now become an even bigger threat to Judah. The ally Ahaz trusts becomes the empire that dominates the region. So there's a simple geographic picture that probably doesn't show up on screen very well. But it's just showing what we just said. So the main spiritual lesson, Isaiah 7 is not ultimately about military strategy. It's about trust. God is asking Ahaz, will you trust me or will you trust political alliances? Wow, what a big foreshadow. That theme appears in the famous verse, if you will not believe, surely ye shall not be established. That's in verse 9. We'll come across that. Everything else in the chapter, including the sign of Emmanuel, grows out of that central question. All right, let's see if that's... let's see what we can piece together here. It went up... Okay, I'm going to read verse 1 again. It came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. So from what we just read, I'm assuming that the reason that they couldn't prevail against Judah was because Judah ran to Assyria for help. Verse 2, and it was told the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim. They formed an alliance, and his heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. I actually want some clarification on that. You mentioned his heart being moved. Why that analogy? ChatGPT knows what I'm talking about. This is a vivid image because everyone has seen what happens when a strong wind hits a forest. The trees sway back and forth, tremble, make noise, appear unstable. They weren't merely concerned, they were shaken with fear. Isaiah is describing the emotional state of King Ahaz and the people of Judah. A modern paraphrase might be, the king and the people were trembling like trees in a storm. Why trees? The analogy suggests several things at once. Fear, the most obvious meaning, is terror. Instability. Trees blown by the wind are moved by forces outside themselves. Isaiah is implying that Ahaz is allowing circumstances to control him rather than standing firm in faith. This connects directly to God's message a few verses later, take heed and be quiet, fear not. Okay. Subtle contrast with the house of David. Throughout the Old Testament, the Davidic kingdom is supposed to be established by God. A tree rooted deeply should withstand storms. Yet Ahaz and his people are acting like trees violently shaken by the wind. This image suggests a lack of confidence in God's promises. And I would add, it suggests a lack of confidence in God's promises by trees which should be rooted deeply and should not lack that confidence. And yet they do. I think that could be said about many saints and how they view what is going on politically right now and what has gone on politically. An interesting irony. Isaiah's prophecy is essentially, you're terrified of these two kings, but a few verses later, God describes them as two tails of these smoking firebrands. Judah sees a raging forest fire. God sees two nearly extinguished sticks. The deeper theme. The image introduces one of Isaiah's recurring lessons. Fear and faith are opposites. Ahaz is being blown around by political events like a tree in a storm. God's invitation is, what's God's counsel? Stand still, trust me, do not let your heart be moved by every threatening wind. And his heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. Then said the Lord unto Isaiah, Go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou and Shear-Jashub, thy son, Isaiah's son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. And there's something about that, the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. There's something about Jesus entering Jerusalem that corresponds with that. What's the conduit of the upper pool? Go forth now to meet Ahaz at the end of the conduit of the upper pool. Okay, the conduit was essentially a water channel, aqueduct, or pipeline that carried water from the upper pool into or toward Jerusalem. Why is Ahaz there? This detail is actually important to the story. Jerusalem depended heavily on its water supply during a siege. If enemy armies surrounded the city, water became a matter of survival. Many scholars believe Ahaz was inspecting or securing Jerusalem's water system because Syria and Israel were threatening Jerusalem. War seemed imminent. He was preparing the city's defenses. So when Isaiah meets him, Ahaz is probably not relaxing. He's engaged in military preparations. What is the upper pool? The exact location is debated, but it was likely a reservoir fed by a spring outside or near Jerusalem. The important point is not the precise spot, but what it represented. Jerusalem's water source and defensive preparations. Interestingly, Isaiah later refers to this same general area again in connection with the Assyrian invasion during the reign of Hezekiah. What is the fuller's field? A fuller was someone who cleaned, bleached, and processed cloth. I didn't know that. Such work required large amounts of water, so a fuller's field would naturally be located near a water source like the conduit and pool. Why does Isaiah mention all these details? The setting reinforces the message. Picture the scene. Ahaz is worried. He is inspecting the city's water supply. He is preparing for war. He is focused on practical defenses. Then Isaiah arrives with God's message. Okay, so think about that. Ahaz is at the aqueduct. He's at the upper pool, and he's freaking out about their lifeline, their water, their provisions. He's preparing for war, and Isaiah shows up. God tells Isaiah to go there, to go where Ahaz is currently. And this is the message. Take heed and be quiet, fear not. The contrast is striking. Ahaz is trusting in engineering, defenses, political strategy, logic, I would add to that list. Everything that makes sense. Isaiah is calling him to trust in God. The conduit of the upper pool isn't just a geographic marker. It places Ahaz in the middle of his preparations for a crisis, making God's challenge more pointed. And this is, I love this summed up. Good job, ChatGPT. Will your security come from water systems and alliances or from faith in the Lord? That is an important question to ponder. Will your security come from water systems and alliances or from faith in the Lord? People might accuse Ahaz of people might commend Ahaz for making the preparations that he made and working hard in that regard. And then Isaiah comes and tells him, this isn't going to save you. This isn't what he says. Trust in the Lord. Your upper pool, your conduit, this isn't what's going to save you. I know you think that it will, and everybody thinks that it will. What if faith in the Lord leads to the alliances? That's like the argument that the doctor provides the miracle through God. Yeah, and I think that's one of those. I think that's a thing that Isaiah. I think he's trying to flip the script on it. Maybe not entirely, but that's something that's stressed in modern day culture, and not a lot of evidence for that concept in the actual scriptures. Okay, if you just tuned in, oh boy, well, I can't really backtrack, but the alliances, no. We already read kind of an overview of the chapter and kind of looked into the future here. God provides a miracle through the doctor. Yeah, I think that's the popular and common justification. But again, I don't see a lot of scriptural support for that. And it's interesting that Isaiah is kind of saying that that's not a thing. But here, okay. Just really quickly, because this is important. This shapes the whole chapter and future chapters. Ahaz is the king of Judah. The kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Syria have teamed up. They're making an alliance to fight against Judah. Okay. Yeah, I need you to know this. Assyria is the big superpower. All the miracles we've had have been from people working through God to bless us. Not all of them. Assyria is the big superpower. And the kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Ephraim, and the kingdom of Syria decide Assyria is getting too powerful. We need to fight them. So they go to Judah, they go to King Ahaz, and they say, team up with us, and we're going to go fight Assyria. And Ahaz, Judah, says, no, we're not going to team up with you. So Ephraim, Israel and Syria are not happy that Judah does not join their alliance. So they turn on Judah. And they're like, well, we're just going to force you to join us. We're going to invade you and install our own king that does what we tell him to do. And so Judah, now it's important to note that Isaiah lives in Judah. Isaiah lives in the southern kingdom. So he goes to Ahaz, and because Ahaz starts freaking out. Ahaz is like, oh no, they're going to come in and kill us. They're going to come and invade us. We're going to lose. So Isaiah tells Ahaz, he says, listen, you can either trust in God and chill out. See, we're in verse 3. We're still at the very beginning of this chapter. So God tells Isaiah to go meet Ahaz at this upper pool, at this conduit, because that's where Ahaz is. He's freaking out. He's afraid of this threat, and so he starts making these physical preparations. And he's like freaking out about the water supply, and he's got to make sure he's preparing for this war. And Isaiah comes to him and he says, this isn't going to save you. He says you can either trust in God or you can continue to make these preparations and put your trust in political alliances. And as we will find out soon, Ahaz does not trust God, and he does make a political alliance with Assyria, the superpower that Israel and Syria are originally trying to fight. So Judah runs to Assyria and hides behind Assyria, and Assyria, another spoiler alert, Assyria then eventually becomes an even greater threat to Judah than the alliance of Syria and Israel were. So the political alliance, that's the roundabout way to answering that's the roundabout way to answer, what if the Lord tells you to make the political alliances? This is why we're reading about this in Isaiah, because we find out that the alliances, as logical as they may seem, are actually, they turn out to be worse than the first potential outcome. So just think about this. It's important to learn the geography and all these things because then you understand you might start to understand the concept. You might start to understand the message that Isaiah is sending. And the message is that we may face a political threat that is very scary to us. That is like, oh boy, okay, step one is that we're offered an alliance. We're offered an alliance in order to defeat a superpower. And it may not be us. It may not be, I keep saying we, but this is just nations. It's the concept. We have a group of people that are offered an alliance in order to go fight a great nation. And that nation, the one that is offered the invitation, rejects it. And instead, and when they reject it, the nations that offered the alliance then turn on that nation, and they get salty about that, and they're angry at that nation now. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to go to war with you instead. And so then that small nation that feels threatened, then they start panicking, and they're like, oh crap. We need to go hide in the great superpower. We need to go hide behind the great nation. Only to find out later, the great nation removes their threat. They take out Syria and Jerusalem, Syria and Israel. But then the superpower turns out to be an even bigger problem than the first two nations would have been. So, yeah, I mean, I'd have to look at, I'd have to reevaluate the nations and what's going on right now. I mean, at first glance, I feel like there's something about is the nation of Israel and the United States relationship. I feel very strongly that is that there's something about that and what's going on right now that applies here, but I don't know. I haven't looked closely enough to really come to a solid conclusion, but I'm going to keep reading. Verse 4. Okay, so the Lord tells Isaiah, I'm going to read verse 3 actually. Then said the Lord unto Isaiah, go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou and Shear-Jashub thy son. Shear-Jashub is Isaiah's son. You two go find Ahaz at the end of the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. Verse 4, and say unto him, this is Isaiah's counsel to Ahaz, take heed and be quiet. Fear not, neither be faint-hearted, for the two tails of these smoking firebrands, for the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria, and of the son of Remaliah. Okay, so let's go back here really quick. Rezin is the king of Syria. So the fierce anger of the king of Syria, and the son of Remaliah is Pekah, who is the king of Israel. So the Lord is saying, chill out. I know they seem scary, but they're really just smoking firebrands. And as ChatGPT explained, burnt out sticks. They're not as scary as they look. They're about to fizzle out. So chill out. Verse 5, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, let us go up against Judah and vex it, and let us make a breach therein for us, and set a king in the midst of it, yea, the son of Tabiel. Okay, so that's their plan. That's their plan. We heard it earlier. And dude, once again, I feel like we're seeing it today. Is they say that's the alliance, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Syria. That's their plan. Is they say, let's go into Judah, let's invade it, let's make a breach therein, and then set a king in the midst of it, yea, the son of Tabiel. And from what we read in ChatGPT's, that's their plan, is they establish the king so that they basically, then the king is a puppet for that alliance. Sound familiar? Verse 7, thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. Pretty straightforward. Ahaz is really scared of this plan. The Lord says, it's not going to work. Just chill. Verse 8, for the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus Rezin, and within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. So within 65 years, Ephraim will be broken, that it be not a people. And I believe that did come to pass. Verse 9, and the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If ye will not believe, surely ye shall not be established. And we got an explanation on what that meant. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. Isaiah's is not ultimately about military strategy, it's about trust. God is asking Ahaz, will you trust me or will you trust political alliances? That theme appears in the famous verse, if ye will not believe, surely ye shall not be established. If ye will not believe, surely ye shall not be established. So that's God's warning to Ahaz. Moreover, the Lord spake again unto Ahaz, saying, ask thee a sign of the Lord thy God. Ask it either in the depths or in the heights above. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, neither will I tempt the Lord. And he said, hear ye now, O house of David, is it a small thing for you to weary men? But will ye weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive, and shall bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Okay. So we've got a prophecy of Christ. Why though? Why? This seems random. And it's weird that, you know, how does the Jewish religion get past this verse? I wonder what it says in Isaiah. Therefore, the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Okay. I expected something to be taken out there because, like, how is that not Jesus Christ? I'm sure there's a good answer to that question. I'm not seeing it here. Especially like it's from the Davidic line. It's from the house of David. I mean, but why? Why are we talking about why is the Lord giving a sign to Ahaz? Especially since Ahaz is living like centuries before the birth of Christ. Okay. Let me kind of formulate my question here. So he first says, ask thee a sign of the Lord thy God. Ask it either in the depths or in the heights above. Okay. It seems like God asks Ahaz to ask God for a sign? A sign? What? Like, why? Hey, ask me for a sign. A sign for what? Doesn't mention what for. Ahaz refuses, and God sends a sign anyway. The sign seems to be referring to the birth of Christ. But that won't happen for another few centuries, which seems odd. You've identified one of the most debated passages in Isaiah. The sequence is, Judah is threatened by Syria and Israel. God tells Ahaz not to fear. God offers Ahaz a sign. Ahaz refuses. God gives a sign anyway, which is the scripture about the virgin conceiving and bearing a son. Your question is exactly the one many readers ask. How would the birth of Jesus 700 years later be a sign to Ahaz in the middle of an immediate political crisis? That's why many interpreters believe there is both a near-term fulfillment and a later messianic fulfillment. First, what was the sign supposed to prove? The sign was connected to God's promise that the alliance of Syria and Israel would fail. Okay, we do understand that. He says, you don't believe that these two nations are smoking firebrands? I'm going to give you a sign because you clearly don't believe that they are. Isaiah had just told Ahaz, their plan to overthrow you will not stand. The sign is evidence that God's word can be trusted. The clue is in the next verses. Isaiah continues, before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. Time out. We gotta read a little bit more here, apparently. So the virgin will conceive and bear a son. We should probably get through the freaking prophecy before we ask about it, I guess. Butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and to choose the good. Okay, I used to know what that butter and honey thing meant. I'm going to ask about that in a minute. For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, before that happens, the land that thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. So before Jesus is born, I guess, the kingdoms of Syria and Israel will be forsaken of their kings. See what verse... hold up. He's just this, like the freaking rest of the chapter is this prophecy. Interesting. In other words, before this child reaches an age of basic moral awareness, the two threatening kings will be gone. I wonder if that happened before, like while Jesus was in his childhood. That sounds like a short-term timetable, not something 700 years in the future. What? Okay, hold on. We have to assume that we have to approach this from a non-Christian standpoint. The clues in that: before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. Indeed, within a few years, Rezin was killed by Assyria and Pekah lost his throne. The immediate threat disappeared. So then who was the child, it says? There are several views. View 1, a child in Isaiah's own day. Many scholars believe Isaiah was referring to a child who would be born soon as a sign to Ahaz. Suggestions include one of Isaiah's sons, a royal child, an otherwise unnamed child known to Isaiah and Ahaz. The important point is not necessarily the child's identity, but the timetable attached to his growth. Okay, that's interesting. So it's saying that it's talking about a child, and this is kind of saying that it's just a child in general. Like before a child that is born right now, from the time that a child would be born right now to the time where it becomes accountable, before it knows good from evil, that small window will include the falling of these two kingdoms, which it then points out that did happen within just a few short years. Both the two kingdoms fell. So view 2 is the dual fulfillment, which, if you know anything about Isaiah, is just packed full of that. You know, why would this chapter even be included in the Book of Mormon if it didn't have a dual meaning? And I don't even think it's dual. Usually these things apply to like Isaiah's time and then Christ's time and the last days. And you will further recognize that Nephi and Jacob, again, Nephi like gave certain chapters of Isaiah. He pointed out that he loves Isaiah. Why did they love Isaiah, the words of Isaiah, so much? Primarily because they pointed to the Redeemer, because they pointed to the doctrine of a Savior. And so now you kind of will see that, you know, Nephi would include this because he understood it to be a fulfillment of the Christ child that he himself saw in vision being born. So imagine you're Nephi and you had the vision and you see everything happening and you see the Christ child, you see this Messiah being born of a virgin, and then you go back and read Isaiah again. I'm sure he read this before he saw the vision, but then you read it again and you're like, wow, dude, Isaiah was spot on. That child was who he was talking about. You start to see why Nephi and Jacob loved the words of Isaiah so much. He talked all about the things that they saw with their own eyes. So many Christians believe the prophecy has an immediate fulfillment, a child born in Isaiah's day serving as a sign to Ahaz, and a greater fulfillment, the birth of Jesus Christ, literally called God with us, translated Emmanuel. This view explains, yeah, that's interesting that the child, that he says that the child would be called Emmanuel, as if this random child would be Emmanuel, or also be a symbol that God was with us. That's kind of weird. This view explains how the prophecy could be meaningful to Ahaz while also pointing forward to Christ. Why does Matthew apply it to Jesus? The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, verses 22 and 23, Matthew explicitly quotes Isaiah 7:14 and applies it to Jesus. Matthew sees Jesus as the ultimate embodiment of God with us, Emmanuel. So even if there was a child in Isaiah's own day, Christians generally see Jesus as the fullest realization of the prophecy. So is that what the Jews think, is that perhaps being born of a virgin just meant that a child would be born by just a woman, a young woman? Because I know that that's like another meaning of the word virgin. And they're like, no, it wasn't talking about Jesus. It was just talking about a sign in Isaiah in Ahaz's day, and that there's not a dual meaning. Like, that has to be it. But it's just so crazy to like to not attribute that to Jesus as well. I wouldn't. I wouldn't not, is what I'm saying. An interesting part of the story is that Ahaz sounds pious when he says, "I will not ask, neither will I tempt the Lord." You know, we've heard like he's righteous. Like, I'm not going to tempt the Lord. But Isaiah rebukes him. Oh. Oopsie daisies. Isaiah rebukes him for I will not tempt the Lord, and Isaiah rebukes him for that. Because, it says why? Because God had just commanded him to ask for a sign. God told him to ask for a sign. Ahaz wasn't displaying faith. He was refusing God's invitation. Many readers think Ahaz had already decided to seek help from Assyria and didn't want to commit himself to trusting God. That's a pretty good theory. So your instinct is correct. If Isaiah 7:14 referred only to Jesus' birth centuries later, it would be difficult to understand how it functioned as a sign to Ahaz. That's why many interpreters conclude that the prophecy had an immediate significance, while also foreshadowing the Messiah in a deeper and more complete way. That approach preserves both parts of the text. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Interesting. The Lord, 17, the Lord shall bring upon thee and upon thy people and upon thy father's house days that have not come from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, the king of Assyria. Okay, so that we're talking about a new era. We're talking about a new something big. Days that have not come since the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, the king of Assyria. But what? So what are we talking about here? Oh yeah, dude. Okay, I remember that this just continues to get juicier. The Lord shall bring upon thee. The Lord shall bring upon thee and upon thy people and upon thy father's house days that have not come from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, the king of Assyria. What was so significant about the days that Ephraim departed from Judah? To understand why that comparison is so significant, we have to go back to the division of Israel after the death of Solomon. What happened when Ephraim departed from Judah? Around 930 BC, the United Kingdom split into two nations, the United Kingdom being the Kingdom of Israel, the 12 tribes. Northern Kingdom, often called Israel or Ephraim. Southern Kingdom, Judah. This was one of the greatest political and spiritual disasters in Israel's history. Wait, what verse? We're now looking at verse 17. It said that the Lord shall bring upon thee and upon thy people and upon thy father's house days that have not come from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, the king of Assyria. So he's saying that there are days ahead that are unprecedented. They're even, they're more. They're greater than even the day that Ephraim departed from Judah. He's describing, and when Ephraim departed from Judah, that he's describing when the kingdom was split into, when the house of Israel, when the 12 tribes of Israel were split into two kingdoms. He's saying that the Lord will bring upon days that are greater than when that happened. And now ChatGPT is telling us that this was one of the greatest political and spiritual disasters in Israel history. So we're anticipating something even worse. A kingdom that had been united under Saul, David, Solomon was torn apart. There were civil conflicts, rival kings, rival centers of worship, recurring wars. Why does Isaiah use that event as a benchmark? God is telling Ahaz, you think the current crisis is bad? Something even worse is coming. God is telling Ahaz, you think the current crisis is bad? Something even worse is coming. I mean, are you kidding me, dude? The division of the kingdom was remembered as a national catastrophe. Yet Isaiah says, the days brought by Assyria will be worse than anything since that split. That is a dramatic warning. The irony, remember the situation. Ahaz is afraid of Syria and Ephraim, and he's considering relying on Assyria for help. God says, in effect, the real danger isn't Rezin and Pekah. It's not those two nations. The real danger is the king of Assyria, the very nation that you're trying to align with. The very nation Ahaz trusts will bring the disaster. And spoiler alert, it did. Assyria eventually, okay, so ChatGPT says, how severe was it? Assyria eventually destroyed the northern kingdom, scattered much of its population, devastated many cities of Judah, reduced Judah to a small surviving remnant. So the judgment Isaiah predicts is not merely another border war. It is a crisis on a scale not seen since the kingdom fractured. A deeper layer, there's also a symbolic significance. The split between Ephraim and Judah represented broken unity, covenant decline, the beginning of centuries of weakness. By invoking that moment, God is saying a new turning point in history is coming. Just as the division of the kingdom changed everything, the Assyrian crisis will change everything. In simple terms, when Isaiah says, days that have not come from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, he means the calamity that is coming will be greater than anything your nation has experienced since the kingdom split after Solomon. To Isaiah's audience, that was one of the strongest ways possible to say, you are about to enter one of the darkest periods in your history. Holy moly, dude. Okay, so what's up, Drew? Like, dude, I mean, are we serious? Are you freaking kidding me? Like that, and I can't, I've stressed this so many times, dude. I've stressed this so many times, but Think about that. You have to think about the context. You have to think about the fact that this is in 2 Nephi chapter 17. These are chapters that Nephi included. It's in conjunction with the vision that he saw. So when you read these chapters, when you read the Isaiah chapters and you start to understand what exactly they're talking about, you start to understand why Nephi and Jacob had such an appreciation for them. And it's because you're like, why? I mean, sure, they're great, they're cool chapters, but why were they so freaking obsessed with these chapters? They could have engraved anything from the brass plates in here. But the reason is because Nephi had a vision, dude. He had a vision, and he saw the Savior being born. He loved the Messiah. He saw the Messiah. So he was like, I'm obsessed with the Messiah now. And Isaiah freaking talks all about it. He talks all about the Messiah. So in turn, I love Isaiah. Here's some chapters that support the idea that a Messiah is coming. But not only that, he is cut off. The vision is cut off. At our day, right now, 2026, the vision, his vision, we see the pilgrims, we see Christopher Columbus, we see the Mayflower come over here, the Puritans come over here, we see the Revolutionary War, we see the restoration of the gospel begin, and then the angel said, right at about our time, the angel says, no more. You're not allowed to write anymore. You're going to see the rest of it, though. He says, you'll see it. I'm going to show you the rest of what happens. But you're not allowed to write it down. That job is for John. And that's what we have as the book of Revelation. But then it makes you wonder, dude. Then you start to see, though, that Nephi's like, well, I can't write it down, but take a peek at these Isaiah chapters. Hint, hint, hint. If you read these Isaiah chapters and understand the concept, you might start to get a glimpse of what I saw that I wasn't allowed to write down. I mean, are you kidding? And this is what they're talking about. This is, that's the thing, is these Isaiah chapters were not random, dude. They're not they're descriptions. They're the closest thing that Nephi had to include in his record to point people to what he saw in vision without actually writing down what he saw in the vision, because he was forbidden to. And he says that multiple times. And you can read, we've already read it once, but we'll even read it again toward the end of 2 Nephi, where Nephi, he expresses frustration. He expresses frustration about the fact that he's not allowed to write it. He says, man, and now I have to stop because the Spirit stoppeth my utterance, or whatever. And then he says that he's left to mourn. He's left to mourn. He's frustrated. Why? Because the people don't get it. They will not hear. They will not understand. And he says they won't understand when the word is given to them. And he says given to them plainly. And he says as plain as word can be. They just won't freaking get it, dude. And I am left to mourn. Oh, man. I'm telling you, dude. This is like revolutionary. Okay. What did I just read? Verse 17. The Lord shall bring upon thee and upon thy people and upon thy father's house days that have not come from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, the king of Assyria. Really freaking bad days ahead of us here. You think the splitting of the kingdom was bad? You have no idea. Verse 18, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall hiss for the fly that is in the uttermost part of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. So who is this? Ah, man. I knew this, dude. I knew it at one point, and I just I'm forgetting, but it's all it's coming back to me. So okay, so the Lord hisses forth. He hisses for the fly that is in the uttermost part of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. So the bee is obviously more threatening than the fly. So let's hear about what those are. What is the fly from Egypt and the bee from Assyria? By the way, I'm just going to make a prediction here because that's kind of like what I like to do. But this is kind of the doctrine where we find out that's re-emphasized. It re-emphasizes the fact that the Lord uses the enemy. The Lord uses these wicked superpowers to stir up God's people to remembrance. That is what I believe the bee from Assyria is referring to. That the Lord then seeks for the bee from Assyria to persecute the covenant people, to stir them up in remembrance. That's my prediction. We'll find out here. What is the fly from Egypt and the bee from Assyria? Let's roll with that question. This is one of the more colorful images in Isaiah 7. After warning Ahaz that Assyria will bring judgment on Judah, the Lord says, and it shall come to pass. Okay, we just read that verse. Then Isaiah says they will come and settle throughout the land, meaning Assyria. What does hiss mean? The Hebrew idea is more like whistle, signal, summon. Time to go. Come here, boy. Summons the fly from Egypt and the bee for Assyria. God is portrayed as a master who merely whistles and nations come at his command. The point is that Egypt and Assyria think they are acting according to their own political interests, but God is sovereign over them. So they think that they're just marching forth on their own agenda, but it's actually all part of the plan, dude. It's all part of the plan. Oh my goodness, Ash, I'm sorry, but you just missed bars. And I can't really go back, but we're now talking about I think you got the gist of it, though, at the beginning, that we've got very terrible days ahead of us. Now we've moved on to verse 18, where the Lord hisses for a fly from Egypt and for a bee from the land of Assyria. So we're finding out what the fly is and what the bee is. Egypt, okay. And here's the point is that Egypt and Assyria think they are acting according to their own political interests, but God is sovereign over them. So whatever this fly is and whatever this bee is, like, these nations think that they're just carrying out their own political agendas, but Isaiah is saying that it's actually all part of God's plan. God is actually the puppet master, and they don't even know it. So why a fly for Egypt? Egypt was associated with the Nile River and its branches, marshlands, swarms of insects. A fly suggests great numbers, nuisance, spreading everywhere. The image is not flattering. Isaiah is picturing Egyptian forces as a swarm of flies that can settle throughout a land. Why a bee for Assyria? A bee is quite different. Bees are organized, disciplined, aggressive when provoked, possess a painful sting, This fits Assyria remarkably well. Historically, Assyria was known for military efficiency, organization, relentless conquest. Many commenters see the bee as representing the disciplined and dangerous Assyrian army. Why mention both? Isaiah is saying that Judah will find itself caught among the great powers surrounding it. Think of the geography. Egypt, okay, so it's showing that Judah, you can't see it, but it's showing that Judah is in between Egypt and Assyria. Instead of trusting God, Judah keeps looking to foreign powers for security. Isaiah's warning is, God can summon both of these powers whenever he chooses. The nations that Judah hopes will solve its problems can become instruments of judgment. I'll read that again. The nations that Judah hopes will solve its problems can become instruments of judgment. An interesting detail, the imagery deliberately contrasts the two powers. Flies swarm and annoy. Bees swarm and sting. But both obey God's whistle. The emphasis is not really on Egypt or Assyria themselves. The emphasis is even the greatest nations are under the Lord's control. To Ahaz, Assyria looked like the answer to his problems. To God, Assyria was merely a bee that could be summoned at will. In context, this continues Isaiah's message to Ahaz. Don't fear Syria and Israel. Don't trust Assyria. Trust God. Ahaz chooses Assyria, not God. So God warns him that the very empire he is relying on will become part of the judgment that comes upon Judah. The fly and the bee are symbols of powerful foreign nations. Okay, I'm going to read this carefully. The fly and the bee are symbols of powerful foreign nations that God can summon into the land as easily as a man whistles for insects. The bee especially foreshadows the painful Assyrian invasion that was soon to come. I wonder what that looks like. You know, I mean, just off the top of my head, it seems, you know, I wonder if it has anything to do with like this infiltration, or I hate to use the word. This is all foreshadowing the alliance still, or did bro already go do that? It seems that he's already chosen that, but maybe it hasn't actually happened yet. But I'm wondering, like, the fly, this is still the warning. Yeah. He's like, yeah, this is Isaiah telling Ahaz, like, don't freaking do this. Do not team up with Assyria. The hiss shall hiss for the fly that is in the uttermost part of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. The fly just seems like this, like it was saying, like, I hate to use the word immigration because that's such a political issue right now, but you know, I think that there's there's credible arguments on both sides. I think that there are refugees that need to be taken care of, but this makes me wonder how, you know, if there really truly is an epidemic of immigration and the effects of like illegal immigration by people that do have malicious intent and are here to just cause more chaos and financial problems and just all sorts of issues. See, they're not attacking anybody. They're not attacking anybody. They're just flies. They're just in and everywhere. And and have become a nuisance. Whereas a bee, the bee sounds more like an actual like attack from an army. I don't know. That's just what's coming to my mind right now. Verse 19, and they shall come and shall rest all of them in the desolate valleys and in the holes of the rocks and upon all thorns and upon all bushes. In the holes of the rocks. We've heard that. Isaiah's already mentioned that. That's where the kings will go in the great day of the Lord. But now he's saying that the Lord and shall rest all of them in the desolate valleys and in the holes of the rocks. So the fly and the bee will rest in the desolate valleys, in the holes of the rocks, and upon all thorns and upon all bushes. And the fly and bee are what rests in the valleys, holes of the rocks, etc. Yes, the fly and the bee are the subjects of the next verse. The image is that when God whistles for the fly and the bee, they come in such numbers that they settle everywhere. What does rest mean? It doesn't mean they are relaxing. It means they're landing, settling, occupying. Think of a swarm of insects covering every available surface. Isaiah is saying the invading powers will spread through the entire land. The locations are significant. Desolate valleys. These are the open, low-lying areas. Holes of the rocks, the cliffs, caves, and rocky places. Thorns and bushes, the uncultivated countryside. Isaiah is covering the whole landscape. It's as if he's saying from the valleys to the cliffs to the wilderness growth, they will be everywhere. Why use insect imagery? Because an insect swarm is difficult to stop, widespread, invasive, seemingly everywhere at once. And I was going to ask about the next verse, connection to the next verse. Immediately after this, Isaiah switches metaphors again. The Lord shall shave with a razor that is hired by the king of Assyria. So the flow is God whistles, the fly and bee arrive, they fill the land. Assyria becomes the razor that shaves Judah. Each image intensifies the warning. A deeper irony. Remember where the chapter began. Ahaz feared the armies of Syria and Israel. God told him not to fear them. Instead, Ahaz looked to Assyria for protection. Now Isaiah says, the nation you trust will spread through the land like a swarm of bees, filling every valley and crevice. So the imagery of valleys, rocks, thorns, and bushes emphasizes the completeness of the invasion. No part of the land will be untouched by the foreign powers God summons. It's a poetic way of saying their influence and presence will reach everywhere. So, yeah, verse 20 says, in the same day shall the Lord shave with a razor that is hired by them beyond the river, by the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet, and it shall also consume the beard. And it shall come to pass in that day, a man shall nourish a young cow and 2 sheep. Does that just mean like not a lot? And it shall come to pass for the abundance of milk they shall give, for the abundance of milk they shall give, he shall eat butter. For butter and honey shall every one eat that is left in the land. Is that talking about, I can't tell if that's talking about prosperity or poverty. It kind of sounds like poverty. You do realize that the King James Version of the Bible tells you do not fear and fear not 66 times. And if you actually go to your Ethiopian, it says the same words 365 times. That is interesting. And that's kind of on theme here. And it shall come to pass in that day, every place shall be where there were 1,000 vines at 1,000 silverlings, which shall be for briars and thorns. Every place shall be where there were 1,000 vines at 1,000 silverlings, which shall be for briars and thorns. With arrows and with bows shall men come thither, because all the land shall become briars and thorns. Doesn't sound good. And all hills that shall be digged with the mattock, there shall not come thither the fear of briars and thorns. There shall not come thither the fear of briars and thorns, but it shall be for the sending forth of oxen and the treading of lesser cattle. No idea what that means. We got to finish out the chapter strong here. What about the young cow and 2 sheep? Is butter and honey describing a state of poverty? Yes, in Isaiah 7, the references to the young cow, 2 sheep, butter, and honey are usually understood as describing a land that has been devastated, not prospering. Here's the passage, and it shall come to pass in that day. Okay, we read the passage. At first glance, it sounds positive. After all, milk and honey is often associated with blessing in the Bible, but the context here is different. Why only a cow and 2 sheep? Before the invasion, Judah was an agricultural society with vineyards, fields, orchards, established settlements. After the devastation Isaiah describes, much farmland is abandoned, populations are reduced, normal agriculture collapses. So instead of large-scale farming, a person may possess only 1 cow, 2 sheep. That sounds modest, almost subsistence level. Yeah, I can. But it's just gonna take me a second. I was gonna try to do this before, but what I have to do is what the heck? I have to make this shorter. See, the problem is that when I switch back to the verses here, it's all weird. Let's make it even a little shorter here. All right. That's as much as I'll be able to show, I think. Okay. Before the invasion, Judah was an agricultural society. Okay, we already read that. So we're talking about this state of poverty. It's just showing that see, what comes to mind is you look around today and we're so prosperous, and there's this network of economy and people trading, and they have, everybody's running their businesses and things are really booming. And I feel like this is what that's referring to, is just it just gets devastated. And now we're going back to the freaking Stone Age. at least economically. That sounds modest, almost subsistence level. Then why abundance of milk? Yeah, that is an interesting word to use there, abundance. Because there are fewer people and more uncultivated land. The surviving animals have plenty of grazing area. The point isn't that people have become wealthy, it's that the economy has shifted from settled agriculture to simple pastoral survival. Back to the Stone Age. A few animals can provide enough milk to make curds or butter. What about the honey? Most scholars think this refers to wild honey, not organized beekeeping. As fields and vineyards are abandoned, wild growth spreads. People live off milk products from a few animals. Honey found in the countryside. That is a very different picture from the cultivated prosperity that existed before. And I would add the cultivated prosperity that exists right now. The contrast, okay, just a few verses later, Isaiah says, places that once had 1,000 vines will become briars and thorns. The cultivated landscape is disappearing. People hunt there with bows because it has become overgrown wilderness. Like this is freaking the dystopian, this is like Hollywood dystopian world we're talking about. Curds and honey here likely means surviving on what the land naturally provides after normal agriculture has broken down. Is it entirely negative? Not necessarily. And I think for the people that are prepared and for the saints that, you know, I'm low-key looking forward to it. Not necessarily. There's a small note of mercy in it. The land is judged, but not completely barren. The remnant still has food, animals, means of survival. So the image contains both judgment and preservation. Judgment, the collapse of normal prosperity, and preservation. The people are not utterly destroyed. Yes, butter and honey in Isaiah is generally describing a reduced post-invasion economy. The message is not everyone becomes rich. It's more like the land has been so devastated that people live simply from a few animals and the natural produce of the countryside, yet God preserves enough for the remnant to survive. That's why the image follows immediately after the prophecies of Assyrian invasion and depopulation. It describes what life looks like after the judgment has been passed through the land. I believe the Book of Mormon was like breadcrumbs. Seminary class taught that at the times of revelations, more books would be revealed. Breadcrumbs. Seminary class taught that at the times of revelations, more books would be revealed. Right. Yeah, that's a big part of the Isaiah of prophecy revolving around Isaiah. In fact, I believe Nephi says at some point that, like, he's like, people aren't going to understand this for a long time, but he says one day they will. He says one day people will start to understand Isaiah, and when they do, that's when you know that they're about to take place. All right. What did we miss? We talked about the bows and arrows, because all the land shall become briars and thorns. It becomes this overgrown dystopian wilderness, and people with arrows and bows, people with their guns are going to be hunting again. And all hills that shall be digged with the mattock, there shall not come thither the fear of briars and thorns, but it shall be for the sending forth of oxen and the treading of lesser cattle. Okay, that's just the... And a brief explanation on the last verse of that chapter. Verse 25. is a final image of an Assyrians describing what Judah will look like after the Assyrian devastation. This verse can be difficult because of the old wording. What are the hills digged with the mattock? A mattock is a farming tool, like a hoe or pickaxe. The hills Isaiah mentions are cultivated hillsides, vineyards, terraced farmland that required regular labor. These were valuable agricultural lands. What happens to them? Isaiah has already said in the previous verse that the vineyards will become briars and thorns, cultivated land will be abandoned. Now he says that these carefully worked hills will no longer be farmed. Instead, oxen and sheep will roam over them. So all this stuff that we've built up, what does "there shall not come thither the fear of briars and thorns" mean? This phrase is translated differently in many modern Bibles because the Hebrew is somewhat difficult. The basic idea seems to be people will no longer go there to cultivate the land because it has become overgrown. The hills cease to be productive farmland. Rather than farmers worrying about clearing and maintaining them, the land is simply left for grazing animals. The overall picture, Isaiah is contrasting the two states. And we've kind of looked at that. The land will become much less developed and much less populated. Okay. I am curious to see if oopsie daisies. I'm curious to see if those verses match between 2nd Nephi and Isaiah. So if we go to the Old Testament, it was Isaiah 7, I believe. Isaiah chapter 7. And on all hills, it says, and on all hills that shall be digged with the mattock. And this just says all hills that shall be digged with the mattock. See, that changes the meaning of that verse, dude. There shall not come thither the fear of briars and thorns, but it shall be for the sending forth of oxen and for the treading of lesser cattle. It says, on all hills that shall be digged with the mattock. And all hills that shall be digged with the mattock. Well, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't change it that drastically. What else? Where there were 1,000 vines at 1,000 silverlings, it shall be even for briars and thorns. Every place shall be where there were 1,000 vines at 1,000 silver. Okay, well, I talked about doing this one day. Just going comparing all these chapters with the Isaiah chapters, but yeah, we'll forget about it. We'll do it another time. We've spent plenty of time on this chapter. Ah, man. Isaiah, dude. Isaiah. I'm telling you. It's no wonder that Nephi, Jacob, and others were so... Even Jesus. That's the funniest part. Is it's not even Nephi and Jacob. It's Jesus himself that then Jacob quotes Isaiah, Nephi quotes Isaiah, Jesus quotes Isaiah when he visits the Nephites. Talk about somebody who had limited words to share. I mean, Nephi and Jacob were around the Nephites for a long time. Jesus was only there for what? A few days? Isaiah. And not only did he quote Isaiah, he also emphasized the fact that they should search them. Search the words of Isaiah. And you start to find out why. Anyway, that's all I got. Emerald tablets and the golden plates are similar. We are in Revelations now, and bet you won't believe me when I say that I have internet proof that what the Bible says is the dead rising. You know, there's really not a lot that I just don't believe these days. I'm open to quite a bit. And the Emerald tablets actually are a very interesting study topic. But yeah, glad you could join us, Drew. It only gets crazier from here, my friend. Are we playing Hunter?